Good afternoon, guys. I thought I would do a read aloud today for fun. So I'm going to read aloud April Fool, Watch Out at School. But today you better watch out at home. It's by one of our favorite authors, Diane DeGroat. And she, if you recognize, you see Gilbert. We've read a couple books with the character Gilbert before. So, here we go. Gilbert woke up and looked at the calendar. It was April 1st, April Fool's Day. He hopped out of the bed and started filling his backpack with tricks to play on his friends. His sister Lola peeked in the door and said, "Knock, knock." Gilbert answered, "Who's there?" "April Fool," Lola shouted. Gilbert laughed and explained, "You're supposed to play a trick on someone, not tell jokes." "Okay," Lola said. "Do a trick on me." But Gilbert didn't have time to play tricks on his little sister. He was already out the door. Gilbert met Patty on the corner. As they walked to school, Patty suddenly said, "Watch out, Gilbert, your shoe's untied." Gilbert stopped to tie his shoe, but it was already tied. "Gotcha," Patty said. "April Fool." Gilbert laughed. He couldn't wait to try that trick on someone else. Principal Pug smiled and waved when he saw them. "Morning good," he said. "Day nice at Ahave." He was talking backward. The bell rang and Patty said to Gilbert, "Up, hurry, let's." See if you can unscramble those sentences so they make sense. Mrs. Bird was not smiling or waving. She said, "Put away your trick so we can get started with our reading lesson. Gilbert, please start on page 10. Gilbert stood up and read aloud. "Where's my book?" Sam asked. "I need it now." Mrs. Bird stopped him and said, "When someone else reads out loud, it would be nice to know where the punctuation marks are." Then she said, "Here's an idea. When you come to a period, say pop. And when you see a quotation mark, say pff. A question mark can be a huh? And an exclamation point is a boing. Try it." Sounds kind of difficult. Gilbert took a deep breath and started over. "Where is my book?" Sam asked, "Pop, I need it now, boing." "Whew," Gilbert said. "This is hard." Louis said, "And it sure is funny, boing." Everyone laughed. Mrs. Bird laughed too and said, "Thank you for being such a good sport, Gilbert." April Fool. Gilbert sat down and made a loud poof sound in his seat. "That wasn't me," he cried. "Somebody had put a whoopee cushion there." "Gotcha," Louis said. By the way, remember these, think what kind of words these are. We've talked about this before. The sound words. Got it? Onomatopoeias. They finished their reading silently, but Gilbert kept thinking pop and boing whenever he saw a period or an exclamation mark. He also kept thinking about how he would play a trick on Louis. He had hot, spicy gum in his pocket, so he turned to Louis and asked, "Would you like a piece of gum, Louis?" "No way," Louis said. Later, Gilbert put a plastic spider on Louis's desk. "This is so fake," Louis said when he handed it back. Then he slapped Gilbert on the back and said, "Your tricks are the worst." But Gilbert wasn't giving up. He still had a few more tricks up his sleeve. He also had a sign on his back that said, "I smell." No wonder everyone was snickering as he walked by the cafeteria. "Louis," Louis grumbled. Before he ate, Gilbert first checked his seat for a whoopee cushion. There was none, so he sat down and he opened his lunchbox. Suddenly, he jumped out of his seat and yelled, "Ah! There was a worm in his apple!" "It's just a gummy worm," Patty said. "And look, there's a note." The note said April Fool. It was signed Mother. Gilbert couldn't believe it. Even his mother had tricked him. At recess, Frank said, "Watch out, Gilbert, there's a bee on your head." Gilbert swatted at his head, while Frank laughed and said, "April Fool." Margaret said, "Watch out, Gilbert, your shoe's untied." Gilbert bent down to tie his shoe. "Made you look," Margaret said. Gilbert sighed. He couldn't believe that he had fallen for that trick twice in one day. Then Philip shouted, "Watch out, Gilbert!" But Gilbert wasn't going to get tricked again. He said, "I'm not." Before he could finish, a kickball smacked him on the head. "I told you to watch out," Philip said. I want you to kind of make a text-to-text connection right now. Think of another fable or a story that you can think of that kind of has to do with this. Maybe the same kind of lesson being taught. Hope you guys know what it is. I thought it was another trick. Gilbert groaned as he rubbed his head. "This is the worst April Fool's Day ever. Everybody's playing tricks on me and I can't trick anyone." "I told you your tricks were bad," Louis laughed. "You'll never trick anyone." Gilbert said, "That's what you think, Louis. I have one more trick I've been saving just for you." Louis laughed and said, "What is it?" "I'm not telling you. You have to wait and see it." Gilbert whispered to Patty what his trick was. Patty said loudly, "You're right, Gilbert. That's the best trick ever." Louis snorted and said, "You'll never April Fool me." As they walked back into the classroom, Gilbert said, "Oh, Louis, let me hold that door for you." Louis laughed. "Is this your trick?" "No," said Gilbert. He held the door open and Louis walked through very quickly. During spelling, Louis couldn't find his eraser. Gilbert said, "Here, Louis, you can borrow mine." Louis looked at the eraser and said, "Is this a trick?"
Nope.
"No," Gilbert said, but Louis inspected the eraser very carefully before he used it. Hopefully you guys are able to see the pages.
We can.
When they went to the art table, Gilbert pulled out a chair and said, "Here you go, Louis, have a seat." Louis looked at the chair and said, "It's a trick, right?" "No," Gilbert said, but Louis checked out the chair very carefully for a whoopee cushion before he sat down. When Louis got up to clean his brush, Gilbert said, "Be careful, Louis, your shoe is untied." "Ha," Louis said, "I'm not falling for that old trick." But his shoe really was untied, and Louis did fall when he stepped on the lace. Everyone laughed. "I told you it was untied," Gilbert said. "I thought it was your trick," Louis said, tying his shoe. "Nope," Gilbert said, "my trick is much better than that." During quiet time, Gilbert brought a book to Louis and said, "I think you should read this, Louis. I really liked it." Louis wouldn't take the book. He said, "Is it a fake book? Are the pages all glued shut? Is it going to squirt at me when I open it?" "No," Gilbert said, "it's just a really good book." Louis took the book, but he couldn't concentrate on the story. He kept looking over his shoulder to see where Gilbert was. I wonder why he's looking over his shoulder. Louis was so busy watching out for Gilbert's trick that he didn't see Kenny putting a fake spider on his desk. Louis screamed when he saw it. "Gotcha!"
Gotcha.
Kenny said. And when Patty told Louis his shoe was untied, he bent down to tie it. "Gotcha!" Patty laughed. And when Louis sat on his own, and then when Louis sat on his own whoopee cushion, and Margaret said, "Gotcha!" everyone laughed.
Haha.
When the bell rang, Louis finally shouted, "I give up, Gilbert. I can't stand it anymore. Do your trick already." Gilbert smiled and said, "There isn't any trick, Louis. I just made you think there was. You got April Fooled. Gotcha."
Gotcha.
The end.